Hello, everybody. Welcome to another beautiful day. The day God has given us. Like we say, we praise and thank Him. Bright and early in Michigan, evening time in Uganda, not just in Uganda, specifically in Bwindi Impenetrable Forest. TJK Shares is taking you all the way back home. Kanungu is my home. And today I'm excited, I am honored, and looking forward to this conversation with one of the few, if one of none, that exists. A woman who has decided she's going to find a conservation, who has decided she will live and work with gorillas in the Bwindi Impenetrable Forest, a mother, a daughter, a doctor, a CEO. Dr. Gladys, welcome to TJK Shares. Please introduce yourself to our audience and greet everybody who is here so we can get in this conversation.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so happy to be here today. Dr. Jackson, many people here talk about you actually in Kanungu at Bwindi. So your reputation precedes you. So I'm really honored to be being interviewed by you today on your show. I am a wildlife veterinarian and conservationist. Mm-hmm. I've been doing this work for quite a long time. If I tell you how long, you know how old I am. But it's almost 30 years. I started working as a first veterinary doctor for the Uganda Wildlife Authority in 1996.
Yes.
And since then, my conservation career has grown into so many different areas. One Health, which I'll talk about in the interview,
yes,
where we address the health of people, animals, and the environment together, and sustainable livelihoods through Gorilla Conservation Coffee. But normally I'm here attending to all the issues we're dealing with, gorillas and the local communities.
So welcome again. That's your home.
Thank you.
Home away from home. Please take us back to the baby. You gave up your age saying you've been doing this work for 30 years. Maybe you are 31. You started when you are 1 year old. We'll take that. Tell us a little bit about your upbringing, your childhood, and what influenced you to start thinking about conservation. So if you can tell us about your parents, your upbringing, your siblings, mom and dad, how was your childhood?
My childhood was, I would say it was privileged but traumatic. I was the last born of a family of 6. My dad was a minister in the first government after independence, when Uganda gained independence in the 60s. So he was a senior cabinet minister, Honorable William Kalema. And the President Obote at the time used to always ask him to go to lead delegations to different countries to shop for Uganda. So he was always going to Eastern Europe and Southeast Asia and different countries like that to shop for Uganda. I never really remember him, sadly, because at the age of 2, he was killed by Idi Amin soldiers. He was one of the first victims of Idi Amin, because when Idi Amin came into power, he was targeting people who were prominent in the previous government. So it was very traumatic for all of us. And my mother suddenly had to look after 6 children on her own. And she later, when Amin was overthrown and President Museveni came into power, she decided to join politics to continue my dad's legacy. And so she was one of the first female members of parliament at the time, and was the link between the old and new women's movement. So she's also, in her own right, she's done a lot with her life. She actually wrote a book, My Life is But a Weaving, about her career as a woman activist, politician, and so many different areas of her life.
Yes.
So yes, I grew up with a powerful, strong mother, very, very, very dynamic, and she was a strong role model for me. And I grew up at home because my sister, who I followed, was 5 years older than me. We never really used to play. She was just outside my age bracket to play. So the pets at home became my companions. My elder brother, who was 10 years older than me, Katerega, he used to bring stray cats and dogs home. And I used to play with them a lot. They became my friends. So at an early age, I felt like I wanted to become a vet doctor.
Oh.
But later on, I would say the other experiences I had, because while I was at home, my mom, where she used to live in Nakasero, she lived next to the Cuban ambassador to Uganda. And him and his wife acquired a pet vervet monkey. So that opened up my eyes to primates. And later when I decided I wanted to get into wildlife.
So here you are, growing up in Kampala. Your dad is in the government, though you only got to know him just for 2 years. Bless his heart, may he rest in peace. And you had a strong pillar in your mother. Many people like us who grew up in Kanungu, now that you go to Kanungu, those years, I was born in 1970, so 1970 Kanungu was Rukunjiri district, actually you wouldn't even see it. Many people's careers they were told what they need to do to go to school. And many Ugandans who listen to us will know. Your father told you, become a doctor, become a lawyer, engineer, accountant. Conservation, oh, wow. But I am glad your father, your mother, and now I see the travel bag was planted in you by your father. It is in your genes. You are all over the place. This time I'm she's in different country, different place, doing different things. But I'm also so glad that your mom was passionate, not only about the politics, but also introducing you to animals, which influenced you to become the person you are now. So you grew up, you did secondary school, high school, university, and you ended up marrying a man who is an entrepreneur. But then he turned around and co-founded a conservation organization with you. How did that happen? Where did you meet? That's the question we always ask couples.
Where did we meet? We met in a very predictable place at a wedding. His uncle married my cousin. And I was a bridesmaid and he was a groomsman.
All right, all flower girls and bridesmen going into weddings. There you were, there you were.
It was a bit of, we were thrown into it because he was actually working in America. He was living and working in America. I was living and working in Uganda. So there's no way we would have met if it wasn't for this wedding, which was held in Uganda. And his uncle told him, you have to come and be a groomsman. So we were on the bridal entourage. I guess we were eyeing each other up, maybe. But I think we started dating 2 years after that. When I came back to America, when I came to America to study and do a master's and a zoo medicine residency after working at UA, Uganda Wildlife Authority, as their first vet doctor, I felt like I needed to go for further studies. And so when I came to America, we reconnected. And that's when we got engaged. And I convinced him to be the first donor to a new NGO I wanted to begin, having left Uganda and wanting to start this NGO. And he agreed. And so we opened up a bank account in Wells Fargo. It used to be called Wachovia, but now it's called Wells Fargo. And that's how conservation through public health began.
Conservation through public health. So you basically influenced him into getting this NGO with you.
Yes.
Met at a wedding. You are a bridesmaid. He's a groomsman. So this was not an arranged marriage. Because anybody watching around the world and hear about our African tradition and say, also, Gladys's uncle arranged for her to come and this guy. No, you saw each other, you liked each other. The tradition of arranged marriage was there many years in our communities, but no longer there. Why did you name the organization Conservation Through Public Health?
Yes, that's a great question. Actually, one of the first experiences I had, one of the first cases I had as Uganda's first wildlife vet at the time, when people never used to touch wildlife. But they thought it was important to have a vet because gorilla tourism had begun. And they were concerned that tourists around the world may bring fatal diseases like COVID-19, like flu, to the gorillas. So Dr. Droma was convinced to take me on as his first vet. But actually, one of the first diseases that happened in the gorillas was not from tourists, but from the local communities. Because Bwindi is surrounded by a high human population density, and even as you approach the park, there's a very hard edge between the community and the park. In fact, I'm at Bwindi right now, and the forest is there, the community is just there. The gorillas started to go outside the park once they lost their fear of people through tourism, and they went back to places they used to range before their home was cut. And so they found that these people are not as hygienic. They're not covering their rubbish heaps. They're not washing their clothes, which they put out to scare baboons, gorillas, and other wildlife. And so they picked up scabies, skin disease, by touching dirty clothing of people in the gardens, and the mite spread through the group. So when they called me to say the gorillas were losing hair and developing white scaly skin, we eventually found out that it was scabies, and we went to treat them. Unfortunately, we lost an infant gorilla, but the rest recovered with treatment of ivermectin. And later on, I felt to myself, why don't we start an organization that improves the health of the people and the gorillas together so that they don't make each other sick? And that's how CTPH was created, conservation through public health.
Wow, that's so innovative. Now, as you are talking, I am reminded of a doctor here at Michigan State University, Dr. Kanene, who was the first man to introduce me to epidemiology and animal husbandry. He's a veterinary doctor out of Makerere through Minnesota, who was taught actually by Professor Mondo Kagonyera, who you also know from Uganda, and he's been teaching here at Michigan State University, combining mostly cows, donkeys, animals, and the epidemiology. And he said to me, near every disease that has come to the animals come mostly from the human beings. And I've hiked the gorillas. I remember the training, the procedures we go through before we go. I've gone there 8 times. This is a promo right now. For those of you in the world who have never seen gorillas, now you have a contact in Gladys. Our friend Nadine from Canada was there maybe 2 weeks ago. Many others have gone there, have gone to Nyaka. So there's a treasure in Kanunga, treasure in Uganda. It's the only place you can see them. And she will make sure that you don't take your diseases and give them to our gorillas. So you do all this work. You are a mother. You are a wife. You are a daughter. How do you balance all these different commitments? Your family life, raising children, and what values are you instilling in your children and youth around the world on how to go about conservation and environmental stewardship?
Yes.
Being a mother.
Balancing work-life balance. But before I even answer that question, I want to say that, yes, I know Professor Mondo Kagonyera, and he's a real inspiration, and he's been very supportive of my career from very early on in my career. He also knows my mom. And I also know, I actually went to Michigan State when I was doing a zoo medicine residency in NC State, North Carolina State University. I remember going for a TB conference in Michigan State. And I believe I met Professor Kanene then, and everyone talks about him. But like we have 2 sons. I'll start off by saying that they influenced me. My younger son wrote this book, Zookeeper for a Week. I influenced him to get into wildlife because he was coming to the national parks from a very young age. From the age of 4 months, he was coming here. His younger brother was coming here from the age of 2 months. So Indigo saw his first elephant, not in a storybook, but in Queen Elizabeth National Park. He said elephant when he was about 2. So so the boys, they grew up like surrounded by wildlife. And I think I influenced them to be really comfortable with animals. They're very comfortable with animals. But I have to say that they're very much into soccer. And actually right now, Indigo's in America trying to get into college to become a college athlete playing soccer.
Wow.
And so at Bwindi, when we started a kids league with the Bwindi community, where you pass the game the soccer game or football game, if you also pass the quiz, they really got engaged in training the kids, and they have so many friends here in the community because they get really challenged when they play football with them. They're very good at football here. And and then my husband, being a co-founder of CTPH, he's also part of my work. And I would say that the way that I've balanced all of that is by, could I call it balancing or blending? I don't think you can ever balance work and life, but I think it's work-life blend.
You can call it anything. At one point, one of the people I interviewed here, I asked her about the balance, and she said, Jackson, it's not even a balance, it is a bucket. I have a bucket of relatives from my husband, I have a bucket of my relatives, I have a bucket of my work, Masaki Nobuisha at URBS. And she said, I cannot even call it balance, then it is going to mean that everything is like 20%, which you can never do. So call it whatever name you want, people will learn a new way of looking at this thing.
Exactly. I'm calling it more like a work-life blend, so that they're so engaged in the work, and they'll always be conservationists. His younger brother also wrote an article in New Vision about COVID and gorillas during the pandemic, because we did a lot. Now, when you visit the gorillas, I don't know when you last visited them, but Jackson, now you have to wear a mask when you visit them because of COVID and any other thing that could come after COVID. And because they were actually, it protects them from other respiratory diseases, and you have to maintain a distance and you should be healthy. So we helped to institute all of that with the rangers, the people who had them back when they come out, the gorilla guardians. And so he became an expert on COVID because he joined me in the trainings during the pandemic. And so, yeah, they're all like, they've become quite good. They've become quite good advocates for conservation, I would say.
So Indigo I want to get in touch with Indigo, your son. I want to get a book in the hands of schools we have built in Kanungu, Kunjiri, and the secondary school in Nyaka. And I will get you to actually do some conservation talk with our staff and our secondary school. Maybe they need to come and do a whole tour of Bwindi Impenetrable Forest. Wow,
that would be wonderful, because when they came to collect Nadine, it was so nice to see that.
And I don't know whether Dennis told you, Dennis is actually a former student, so a pioneer student of Nyaka, who is now employed and works with the Nyaka organization. So conservation society, conservation club needs to start at the secondary school. And next time at Michigan State, please let me know. I live 5 minutes. I'm basically 5 minutes from Dr. Kanene, and he's 1 minute from the university.
Wow, maybe I could come and give a talk there one day.
We can organize for you to come and talk about your book, come and talk about conservation. But before we get to the book, as Uganda's first wildlife veterinarian officer, what are some of the challenges you have faced in this career, especially when you are beginning, and what have you done to overcome them since you're still standing?
One of the biggest challenges I faced was people were not used to treating wild animals. In fact, no one had. It was almost unheard of. And so I had to always justify every time I attended to a sick animal. Like they would say, okay, if it's 2 gorillas fighting, it's time for a new animal to take over the group. If a warthog is limping, it's time for the lion. The lion needs to eat something. And sometimes I understood their arguments, because you're dealing with nature and it's survival for the fittest. But because as human beings, we've over-interfered with them, such as the gorillas, we've shrunk their habitats, and now they're picking up diseases from us. We had to do something. So that teaching people that, my colleagues who were all older than me, because I came in fresh from university, I had to kind of convince them that what we're doing is the right thing to do, even for conservation, not only for animal welfare. So that was a big challenge, but also fundraising was a very big challenge, because there wasn't much money for veterinary medicine in conservation, because it was also fairly new, animal welfare in conservation. So it's easier to find money for anti-poaching, law enforcement. Community conservation was beginning to pick up, but healthcare in conservation, there was hardly any money. It's still been a challenge up to now, but we are getting better at convincing donors that if you don't address health and conservation together, you won't have holistic outcomes in general for sustainable development. So that was hard. Another hard part was being a woman. I would say, I mean, people took me seriously because I had a unique skill I was bringing to the table. Yes. But obviously, you're not as fit as men. So physically hiking these steep hills of Bwindi, as you know them.
I know. 6 hours to find the gorillas.
Exactly. But the rangers really, they appreciated me because I was bringing a unique skill and I was a senior person from headquarters. So they would pull me up the hill, push me up the hill if necessary. And they've been so supportive, all of them, because, you know, I taught them so many skills about wildlife health, about monitoring the health of the gorillas. And so they appreciated it. And I learned a lot from them about how to track animals, how to approach animals. So it was, a lot of the challenges were overcome by learning teamwork, learning to work with people from different disciplines, as I've only been in the organization for 4.5 years. And I had to learn how to work with people in different disciplines, which was very good for me, because I know that I knew that my profession has its limits and I have to depend on others to do my job, to find the animals, to approach them. And they also learned that they had to depend on me when it came to animal welfare issues or moving animals. In my book, you get to read that I also worked with giraffes, elephants, moving them, translocating them for various reasons. And so it was, I would say it was a very interesting job, very challenging, but very interesting.
And very challenging because really when you, in your early career, working with Uganda Wildlife Authority, you were not only focused on Bwindi and the gorillas, you are focused on all national parks in Uganda, from Kidepo, Murchison Falls to Queen Elizabeth, and everything in between. So it's a lot of work, but you've done it so graciously. You've spread it all over the world, which is one really reason why I wanted to have this conversation with you. Tell us when you decided, I'm going to write a book about this. I can't be in North Carolina, be at Michigan, be at BBC in the UK. Let me put this together for why? Why did you do it? And the process of getting that book out, Walking with Gorillas.
Yes, I decided to write this book. As you can see, I'm in the rain over there. It happens a lot.
Rain, that's why it's called the rainforest. Rain is every day.
Yes, I decided to write Walking with Gorillas because I felt like I had unique experiences to share. And I felt like, you know, and they put me in this position. It's like a calling from God. He put me in this position to share these experiences that people can also learn from them and see better ways of carrying out conservation and sustainable development, and, you know, learn from my mistakes and successes. And everybody should feel that they can all be conservationists. I actually wanted this book to be a popular book, not an academic book, because we wanted to reach people beyond my field, so that everybody feels they can do something about protecting wildlife, protecting the environment. And so, but I actually wanted to write it after I had finished working at UWA, the Wildlife Authority, and I kept all my notes, I kept all my memos, everything, photocopied them, left them with my predecessor, the person who was gonna come after me. And I said, okay, I'm gonna go to North Carolina and write, because I felt like I was so busy, as you mentioned. There's 22 protected areas in the whole of Uganda Wildlife Authority. Can you imagine? 10 national parks and 12 wildlife reserves. And I was always on the go. So I thought, let me write this book so that I can talk about my experiences. But I was also inspired by the person who wrote the foreword, Dr. Jane Goodall.
Yes.
She was one of the first people to study primates in the wild and stay there for a long time.
Yes.
She studied chimpanzees in Gombe National Park. And for her, from an early age, she was always writing. And I used to read her books even when I was a veterinary student in London, Royal Vet College, University of London. So I thought, Jane Goodall writes, so I can also write.
Yes.
But when I got to America, you know how America is.
I know.
Very fast paced. And I was working at the zoo as a clinical vet, plus doing a master's. That was the package of the residency, zoo medicine residency. I never had time. And then I met my husband, Lawrence. We got married. We started an NGO, which is like a child. Then we had children, 2 boys who are actually spaced like the gorillas,
Yes.
1.5 years apart. And so it was just so much work, so much. Then finally I thought to myself, time is going on, because after we started the NGO, then we also started Gorilla Conservation Coffee to support the farmers around the park. So to get a good price for good coffee so they don't have to poach. I felt to myself that, no, I need to write before I start forgetting things. And actually I started writing the outline for the book, seriously, in 2019. December 2019, before the pandemic began, around December, before we knew that we have going to have a global pandemic.
Yes.
Then the pandemic begins. In a way, it gave me more time to write, but less time to write. It gave me more time to write because most people were at home in lockdown. There was not a lot of activity going on. You weren't expected to go to work. But it gave me less time to write because we were so busy trying to prevent gorillas picking up COVID from people and people picking up COVID from each other around the park because of our mission of CTPH, Conservation Through Public Health, that we were essential workers. We're on the Ministry of Health COVID Task Force. We never stopped working all through that pandemic. But however, it made the book more attractive for publishers, because when we were looking for a publisher, we eventually got one in America, Skyhorse Publishing. It was right in the middle of the pandemic. And when they were like, actually, what you're doing makes sense. If we don't protect the environment, if we over encroach, a lot of viruses will jump back and forth between people and wildlife. And we need this book. People need to read this book. So it was easy to convince the founder, the manager, the owner of Skyhorse Publishing, to get me to be an author.
Yes.
To be a publisher. He wanted me to be part of his authors, and they gave a lot of support. Within a week of meeting him, he said, we want to publish this book, and everything moved very quickly after that. So I think, so that's why and I think it was the right time to do it, because after a while you forget these things, you forget the details and the vivid experiences you had. And I felt like I really needed to get this story out. Yeah.
All right. So, Doctor, this is going to be, since you lived in USA and children are growing up in USA, when football is playing here, they have what they call commercials that cost $3 million.
Wow.
So your commercial here is not going to cost you anything. Anybody who has not read the book, why should they pick up the book? And when they do that commercial, what they will find inside the book. I've read the book. I'm not going to give it away. Why should they pick up that book? And when they pick it up, tell the audience, you won't pay $3 million to do this. Tell the audience what they will find inside the book and make it sweet and short so everyone can go pick it up. And where they...
I would say the reason why people should read Walking with Gorillas is it's a story about a Ugandan woman who decided it was really important to protect our precious wildlife. And I was encouraged to follow my dreams. And this book, I hope, will inspire anybody reading it to protect wildlife and to follow their dream, whatever it may be. Because I started my conservation career actually as a young student, setting up a wildlife club in high school. And you're never too young to start following your dream. But I'd like people to be inspired to read this book and feel we should visit the gorillas in Uganda, we should protect wildlife, and we should follow our dreams, whatever dream they may be, however unusual it may be. And to also encourage their children and their loved ones and people around them to follow their dreams, however impossible they may seem to be.
Perfect fit. So for anybody who wakes up and breathes, or was birthed by anybody who breathes, this is a book for you. The whole world
Yeah.
must read this book. Thank you for writing it. Thank you for giving us such a privilege to get closer, even for me who know very well and have worked this. When I read that book, my memories went there, but I also got to learn about your background, how you were raised. I have 2 daughters. I've told them this is a must read. In the summer, will be there. They are too young to go do the work, but they always like to come around and we visit the Batwa people and participate in the conservation. Talk about the coffee, gorilla conservation coffee. Americans wake up every single day and drink so much coffee every day. Why gorilla
Yes.
conservation, and how do you organize farmers to bring this coffee together and process it?
Yes. It's so nice that your daughters come here often. Can I ask how old they are?
They're 10. Sally and Tessa are 10 years old. Nicola,
Wow.
follow Nicholas, who is 12 years old, and the oldest one is Nicholas, who is 21 years old. So for him, he can walk and see the gorillas in summer this year.
Yes. Oh, fantastic. I have a whole chapter about gorilla conservation coffee in here, chapter 25, as my husband keeps reminding me. Because he gave me the idea. He gave us the idea to start Gorilla Conservation Coffee. It's a social enterprise where whenever I was checking on the gorillas, you often cross coffee farms. And I got to find out that these farmers were not getting a fair market or a steady price. And yet they are not part of the tourism industry. Yeah. Not everybody can be a ranger or a porter who carries your backpack to the gorillas or sell crafts or accommodation. And they were still entering the park to poach because they couldn't get enough money from coffee to buy meat. So it was easier to go into the forest and hunt an antelope like a daika or a bush pig. People in Uganda don't eat gorillas or Uganda and Rwanda. In fact, in Uganda, the Batwa who used to live in the forest it was bad luck for them to look in the eyes of a gorilla. So they would avoid them, but they accidentally get caught in snares and they get speared, if they come into confrontation with a bushmeat hunter, a poacher. And so my husband was like, why don't you create a global coffee brand to save the gorillas? And a lot of tourists, they tell you when you're trekking, they tell them this is a coffee tree. Most of them have never seen a coffee tree. They've only seen coffee in a supermarket or a cafe. So they enjoy it. It's part of the tour. And then you finally get to the gorillas. So we started to support the farmers around the park. And Gorilla Conservation Coffee, we give a good price for good coffee. It has to be good, premium or specialty, because we have to sell it at a higher price. And if it's good, then it means people will buy it all the time. And this coffee actually won 92 points in Coffee Review in America.
Whoa.
In California, it was number 29 out of 30 of top coffees they reviewed that year in 2018, including coffees from Rwanda, Burundi, Costa Rica, Colombia. This coffee was one among the top 30. So we know that in Uganda, we produce good coffee. It's Arabica at the moment. The first brand is Arabica, named after my favorite gorilla, Kanyonyi.
Yay!
Who I knew since he was a baby.
The
idea is that people, the idea is that people could come, visit the forest, come to see the gorillas, meet Kanyonyi. But sadly, he died a few months after we created this brand, a year after we created the brand, not because of human disease. He fell off a tree, got a wound in his hip joint, which never recovered in spite of treatment. Then he got into a fight with another silverback, wanted to take over the group. Natural things. So he died in that way at the age of 21, which is young for gorillas, actually. Gorillas are almost like us. They can live up to 50 years. But we thought that his legacy can continue through the coffee. And so we sell it in different places, including in America. The website is gccoffeeusa.com. And we have distributors in America who've been doing it. We also sell it in the UK, manirobins.com, and New Zealand. And we want to start selling it again in South Africa and Canada and Australia. During the pandemic, we got a bit disrupted, but we want to start selling it again. And so, and it's very exciting to have Gorilla Conservation Coffee here. And of course, you can find it in Uganda at the Gorilla Conservation Cafe that we have, where you can also buy the books. And it's at the Entebbe duty-free transit shop. And it would be nice if people in America can buy it, because whenever you buy it, you know that you're keeping a farmer out of the forest. Okay. Because the money that comes from selling the coffee, we use directly to buy coffee from farmers, so they don't have to enter the park to poach and collect firewood. We currently engage 600 farmers. Unfortunately, we're not able to buy all their coffee yet because we don't have enough working capital. But we hope as the market grows, we can buy all their good coffee. And we're pleased that 1/3 of them are women. When we started out, only 5 out of 75 farmers were women. And as we grew, because we do it through model farmers, where one farmer influences 19, we grew to 500 farmers and 120 were women. And more recently, we increased the women by 100. And so we have 600 farmers, of which 230 are women. It's so important because women actually tend to be better farmers than men. They tend the garden, pay more attention to detail. And of course, when you empower a woman, you know that the child is going to go to school, get proper health care. The men it may or may not happen. Sometimes when a man gets rich, he marries another wife. But we're telling them, no, don't marry another wife. Use that money to improve the cost of, the standard of living in your own home, because it's a joint partnership between you and your wife. Yes. But yeah, no, it's been very exciting.
Surprised that when you invest in women, actually you have better returns. Yes. Doctor, we as a NYAC organization actually have grandmothers who are growing the coffee that is going to conservation coffee. We want to pause for the first part right now. Don't go away. Stay connected here. This is going to be aired in 2 parts. Put up the book again. Before you do anything else, you have finished this. Part 1, part 2 is immediately the following week. Get the book, Walking with Gorillas. Get the coffee. When we come back, we are going to dig deeper into success stories. What Gladys and her team, how she recruits workers to work with her, how this coffee is doing. We are going to go in the impact, and then we are going to learn about advice that she gives those who want to follow her footsteps, because she's already a mentor. So don't go away. Keep sharing. This is part 1. We always know on this channel that the best is yet to come. Let's come back right back.
And you can get the book in Amazon, which I hadn't said yet, Barnes & Noble, and many independent bookstores in America and Canada. It's in very many places because my publisher has a wide distribution, also all over the world.
All over
it's in about 60 countries all over the world. And so it's so exciting because the publisher has a wide distribution. And so you find it in all these different places. And once you get the book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, please write a review so we get our reviews up.
That's what I was going to say. So go get the book, continue to share the episode, and the next episode follows right away.